This is Thunder Road. It was first produced by Milton Bradley in 1986 and was originally conceived to be a Mad Max board game. However, the decision was made not to go ahead with that branding, so Milton Bradley did go ahead with the production of the board game, but under the name Thunder Road. However, it only takes a brief look at this game to see where the inspiration came from. Now today I've got an original 1986 Milton Bradley edition, and I'm also fortunate enough to have this 2023 Restoration Games version of the game available to compare it to. This is called Thunder Road Vendetta. Now, it's not meant to be a one-to-one recreation of the original Thunder Road. Restoration Games got the rights to the name and decided to retool it a little bit and add a few features. So I thought it would be fun to compare what's changed and what stayed the same over the course of about 40 years. Now let's have a look at the box and art, starting with the 1986 Milton Bradley edition. Right away, we see some bold colors and some really bright titling for Thunder Road. This is very exciting. Again, it's very obvious that Mad Max was the inspiration for this game because the physical shape of the Avenger car is definitely Max Rakitansky's V8 Interceptor. We have a yellow one up here, and then in the background you can also see a blue one getting destroyed where it's got the iconic slotted headlights. So it's very obvious that this was a Mad Max game that then they've given a new treatment to make it its own thing, which I appreciate. The brightly colored cars, I mean, the bold colors are really eye-catching. So the art direction is fantastic on this. Of course, you've got the classic Milton Bradley white stripe that shows you the intended age of players and gives you a brief outline of what the game is about. When we flip the box over, we've got pretty standard fare for board games. We've got a picture of some kids having a great time playing the game, as well as some close-up shots of the game's various components and its unique game board that provides a infinite road or infinite highway chase experience, which is really neat. And then some brief description of what the game is like inside. Now, this is a lift-off top box. It has plenty of storage for everything, which I really like. I actually was able to keep some spare parts in this box. It can be difficult to get a complete 1986 edition, and so I had to get a couple of parts lots with various little cars, and so I'm able to keep those separated from the main gameplay cars very easily with this organizer. So I gotta say, as far as how Milton Bradley set this up for storing the game, this pleases the couch. This insert is also great, though there's no real story printed on the box like what you'd get in something like Candyland or 13 Dead End Drive. I do like the descriptions of the various vehicles and what type of armaments they have. That's very neat and helps with the immersion. So I gotta say, I very much like the game box for the 1986 Thunder Road. It's a prime example of perfect design for giving a perfect amount of storage, as well as just great display quality. What wonderful cover art. Now let's move on to the 2023 Restoration Games edition of Thunder Road called Thunder Road Vendetta. And wow, look at this, is definitely a departure from the Milton Bradley art. This looks, for some reason, they both depict some crazy highway carnage, but I gotta say there's a certain bite to the art on Thunder Road Vendetta that I find very attractive. Love the color scheme of the box. Print quality is great, and actually one thing I will remark is actually the box itself feels very rich. It's got this very nice tactile print on it. Milton Bradley, this is just a nice glossy print. It feels like traditional cardboard. I'm not sure how they wrap this up, but this just feels like a high quality game box. When you flip it over, we have some close-ups of the game. We don't actually have depictions of people playing the game, but there's so many components to the new version of Thunder Road. And the box is a little bit smaller footprint-wise, so I understand why they're being economical with the space. Very light on the description of the game, mainly just descriptions of the parts. When we open it up, it has a very nice little organizer in it for keeping all of the parts separated for easy storage and ample room to keep the game board. So again, both Thunder Road Vendetta from Restoration Games and the original Thunder Road from Milton Bradley they're pro status as far as giving you storage space and organizers in their boxes. So bravo to both manufacturers. Both game boxes, these are great. These game boxes, Thunder Road pleases the couch. I love it. It's awesome. So let's move on to the games themselves, starting with the 1986 Milton Bradley edition. Now, right away, you might be seeing this handful of dice and thinking, wow, this might be kind of complicated. And in reality, it's surprisingly simple, in fact, refreshingly so. In this game, 2 to 4 players will each select a color-coded team of vehicles. Each player will receive 4 vehicles: a lightweight Doom Buggy, a medium-weight Avenger, a heavyweight Eliminator, and a Thunder Chopper. Players will arrange their vehicles in this predetermined starting grid. This allows the game to separate faster vehicles, medium-speed vehicles, and slow vehicles. It's arranged this way because all vehicle movement is determined by 6-sided die, these 3 yellow movement die. At the beginning of each player's turn, they will roll these 3 movement die and assign 1 die to each one of their vehicles, which will signify how far that vehicle can move on this turn. If their vehicle starts their turn on this darkened highway strip, they can also roll this black die to get what's called a highway bonus, an amount of spaces that they can add to their original movement roll. Depending on where they can land, they can decide to shoot or ram into other enemy player cards in an attempt to eliminate them. When that happens, players will roll their combat die. In the event that they're ramming another vehicle, the total of the roll on the combat die and the vehicle size will be added together to determine the victor of the ram. In the event of shooting, the player will have to try to roll the amount that matches the size of the vehicle they're trying to shoot to get a successful shot. So for instance, if I'm shooting at the Avenger, which is a size 5 vehicle, I need to roll a 5 or better on my combat die in order to land that shot. Now, vehicles only have 1 hit point, so if you successfully ram a vehicle or successfully shoot a vehicle, that player's vehicle is turned over. Now, it can be repaired if a player managed to roll double 6s on their movement die before that car's track segment is dropped. Now, that's the part that gets real exciting. These track segments link, but there are only 2 of them, which means that if any player's car gets to the end of the far end board piece, this back end board piece gets dumped, and any cars that are still on this are disqualified and immediately lose. So, in other words, you can actually outrun the competition instead of trying to outgun the competition, which makes this game extra white knuckle. I found it to be a lot of fun. Also, I don't want to forget the Thunder Chopper here has some unique rules. So as we talk about switching out board segments, once per board segment, a player can attack another player's vehicle with the Thunder Chopper, and they just roll the combat die, just like shooting them with a ground vehicle. So it's like an extra attack that you get on anybody without having to move a vehicle in position to attack them. So it adds an extra little randomness to the board. Also, these wrecks, they block traffic, and in order to get through them, you can roll to ram them, but you have to roll a 4 or better. So it's a 50-50 whether you're in a heavy vehicle or a light vehicle. So, I mean, the parameters for getting your vehicle destroyed are very cutthroat. I mean, it kind of feels like all of them are made of glass, but the gameplay is so fast and frenetic, it's very easy to get through a round and start again. And this is one of those games where it's best when played with 4 players. So I highly recommend the 1986 Thunder Road. Like I said, it seems like it's going to be difficult, but once you realize 3 car, 3 dice, move the segment when you get to the end. If you're on the highway, you have a highway bonus. And remember a few basic combat rules, like if you're shooting a car, roll the higher number, or if you're ramming, roll the higher number, which that's hardly difficult to recall. So I like the genius and simplicity. I think this was perfectly targeted towards the market that it was intended for. Absolutely have no trouble teaching people how to play this game. In fact, play through 1 or 2 turns with anybody, instantly they've got it. I've never had anybody really struggle with this game, and that's one thing that I very much admire about the original Thunder Road is Though the amount of dice can look a little intimidating to some gamers, it takes very little orientation to get somebody up and running and enjoying this game. And surprisingly, I've had players who, for instance, I was doing a teach the other day where I had a player who didn't want to fight with anybody. She didn't want to shoot anybody at all, and she totally outran the whole team. She outran the whole board. Everybody else was fighting. Everybody else wanted to cause chaos. She just got the zoomies and went and won the game without firing a single shot. I don't even think she lost a vehicle. I think she just kept everything rolling, which was very unusual and something that I was surprised to see. But that's kind of the unique thing about this, is there's a lot of randomness to this game. I mean, it's all dice based, but there is a level of strategy of how hard do I want to come at my enemy versus how fast do I want to go. So the 1986 Thunder Road, very easy to pick up and play, action-packed, lots of fun. Now let's have a look at the 2023 game Thunder Road Vendetta by Restoration Games. Right away we can see a lot of similarities and a lot of differences. Before we get too far into this, I want to point out that the edition that I got a hold of does include some additional what they call detail wash on the little car figurines. That means there's a thin black paint that they ran over these that settles into the little cracks and details and makes them stand out more. A lot of traditional retail versions of this game may not have that feature, so I don't want anybody to feel like they got cheated if they pick up a copy of this and it doesn't look like what I have on display. Anyway, going into this, you still have the same 3 vehicle classes plus your chopper, so you still have your Doom Buggy, which is your rated small, your Avenger, which is your rated medium, and your large Eliminator, plus the Thunder Chopper, albeit they've gone through quite a dramatic redesign. I will say, even though this game looks and feels very Mad Max, because obviously that was what it was designed to be, Restoration Games really stepped out and gave Thunder Road a unique look, which I very much appreciate. Now it no longer looks derivative of any source material that we've seen. It really looks like its own thing, and I very much appreciate that. And I gotta say, the game board, the art on the game board is fantastic and cartoony. It's very reminiscent of video games such as Borderlands. It just has a nice kind of comic booky feel, which I enjoy. So, and also what's kind of neat is the original Thunder Road only had 2 highway segments. They were single-sided. They were not named anything special. They're just, it's a highway that you just connect over and over and over again. It's a Mobius strip, so to say. It's never ending. Now, this one is a little bit different. Restoration Games gives you 5 game tiles that are reversible. So there are many variations to the highway on this one, including where hazards are located, where mud is located, the width of the highway, which grants you, again, a highway bonus similar to the first one. So they added quite a bit of variation, which I thought was neat. Also, they added a limitation to the duration of the game if you're playing 2-player. If you're playing 2-player, you're pretty much limited to playing a 5-tile race, which is plenty. Trust me, I played this 2-player, and I gotta say, outrunning becomes a much more valid strategy when you're playing 2-player, and having it limited to a 5-tile to keep the game moving, that's excellent balance. However, that being said, the game does also limit, when you're playing 3 to 4 players, you do add a finish line to the game once one player has been completely eliminated, to prevent the game from dragging out so far that you have one odd person out who's bored for too long. Because the action that happens on this game board is very exciting, but nobody wants to sit there for a half hour while the rest of a game plays out. And I think that that's very fair design. Now, like the original Thunder Road Vendetta, your cars are controlled with 6-sided die. They're very nice and weighty. This is the set from the white team. In the original Thunder Road, every player shares these yellow movement die. In Thunder Road Vendetta, each team gets 4 6-sided die color-coded to match their team. So I have green on display here. I had white at hand. And when I compare them, I gotta say the ones from Vendetta, they're not much bigger. They're a little bit, but almost like visually indistinguishable. However, the weight is just lovely. They're very chunky. They drop right down. They feel very nice. They don't bounce around too much. So I really like the quality of the die, and that carries over too to these special action die that you see here. We've got these multicolored die. I'll show you some close-up shots of them. So you get a movement die, you get a highway bonus die, you get a shooting or attack die. This is called the stunt die. This determines how far a car is flung if it gets flung a certain distance. And this is your ramming die. It determines which vehicle comes out on top in the event of a ramming situation. So they kind of spread it out a bit much. It seems more complicated at first glance because, wow, now everybody has their own handful of dice and each action has its own determining die. So this is going to be kind of tough. And realistically, it's not. In fact, one thing that they did that was very, very nice was they, on the back of the rules, and when we look at this later, they have a very nice quick reference for everything. So Restoration really went out of their way to add features, but also make the features not overwhelming. Now, instead of starting in a predetermined starting grid, contrary to the display that I have up here, all players will start behind the first tile and then move on to the tiles. So there's no predetermined starting grid. There's a little bit more strategy when you start out. Also, that gets rid of the speed buff for smaller vehicles. Now, the trade-off is with smaller vehicles, they are harder to shoot. So there's some kind of interesting stuff is they can take less damage, but they're harder to shoot, basically symbolizing that they're more maneuverable. But there doesn't seem to be like a ramming buff between the big and the small vehicles that throws everything off. So it's kind of funny as they kept sort of a speed buff, but they didn't have as much of a ramming buff as what you see in the original game. But I don't mind that because everything else is very, very nicely balanced. Now, that being said, you'll notice that we have these red hazard tokens as opposed to these black plastic wrecks. So that's another neat thing Restoration did with this game is as players travel down the track, they will pass over these hazards. They can try to avoid them, but they make them very difficult to avoid, and that's okay. It's part of the chaos. Now, in this instance, this hazard I picked up is just another harmless segment of road, but it also has the possibility of being a landmine, and my vehicle could take damage. Now, when my vehicle takes damage, in this game, vehicles can take 2 points of damage before they're, before they are rendered immobile. Now, they can still be fixed when they're rendered immobile. They're not completely destroyed at that point, inoperable or something like that. But anyway, if I get damaged, I have to pick up one of these damage tokens and play out what it tells me to do. So for instance, in this instance, it's blast off. So I got hit by a mine. I'm going to take a damage point, and now I have to roll the stunt die and the direction die. And this tells me that my car is going to shoot off 3 spaces backwards. Now you can see if my car gets shot backwards a few spaces and hits another car, well, now it rams that car, and I have to play that out because they just hit each other. So it can get very chaotic very quickly, and that was just from a mine. Some of these hazard spots, we've got roads, we've got mud, we've got mines, and then we've also got like oil slicks. And here we go. Here we've got wrecks. So if you get a wreck, then you do put down one of these little black plastic wrecks, similar to the original game. And this now acts as a barrier that you either have to shoot or ram through to get past in the game. So it's very exciting. Like I said, it seems very complicated, but they did a lot of things to make it simple. For instance, this dashboard that you see at the front of the table, I left this up so you could see here. I thought it was very exciting. So in the original game, you just have to keep track. There's no kind of heads-up display or dashboard for a player to keep track on. So everybody has to be very cautious about don't forget to move which car when. What I admire about what Restoration Games did is they give you a little card for each one of your vehicles. And so when you roll your movement die, you can place your die there, and then when you have completed your movement, you can slide your die to the turn complete marker on that card. It helps you keep track of each and every car. Now, the other thing is you have this command tile on the end, and depending on what you roll, you can issue an additional command. And that's why in Thunder Road Vendetta, you have 4 die instead of 3. So that die can either allow you to call in an airstrike from your Thunder Chopper, which is now no longer limited to 1 strike per tile. Now it's just if you want to spend die on that command. Or you can give one of your cars a nitro boost, or you can give a car a drift option where, for instance, if you're driving past another car on the same tile, you normally are stopped and you have to ram them. You can choose to drift and your car can pass by them without hitting them, which is awesome. And then instead of rolling double 6s to repair, now if you happen to roll a single 6, you can assign it to the repair command and repair your vehicle. I was hoping to roll a 6 on cue there, but you know, it never quite happens when you're trying. Anyway, like I said, it sounds complicated, but the way that they made it so that you have more freedom of commands over your vehicles, things like nitrous and drifting, things like being able to call in an airstrike multiple times. Also, the Thunder Choppers have a unique effect. Before in 86, if the Thunder Chopper was on a space, vehicles could pass under it. Now they act as a hazard. So if you place a Thunder Chopper on the map, no vehicle can end their turn in the same space as the Thunder Chopper, or that vehicle gets eliminated. So it becomes a road hazard in and of itself. So I actually really liked a lot of the changes that came along in the 2023 edition. It's more complicated, but not by much. And in every way, it makes the game more rewarding. So I would highly recommend this one. Now, before we get too far into the comparison, let's take a moment and look at the rule books, starting with the 1986 Milton Bradley edition. Now, right away, we've got a single piece fold out, which I love single piece fold outs like this because you don't have any corner folds that are going to wear out. This is a black and white copy, unsealed paper, but the print quality is good. The text is large. Again, there's no real story to speak of outlined here. Mainly, they're just talking about how turns play out, the general rules of the game. But it's very thorough. When I went through here, I never was left with any questions. I mean, the gameplay is very straightforward and simple, and this is obviously going to stand the test of time. It even has assembly instructions for all the parts when you first open the game. So, pretty standard rule book, but very, very nice in its simplicity. When we go over to the 2023 edition from Restoration Games, which I brought this out earlier, you've already seen full color glossy paper, nice heavy weight. It just, oh, look at that color print. Look at how nice that is. Nice clear pictures of every element of the game. Very clear on the rules. Again, you can see with a rule book this hardy, this can look kind of intimidating to new players, but actually if this were a fold out, given the print size, there's probably a similar amount of word count in here. Similar word count, I imagine. But again, I really like that everything is very clearly explained and you have a nice quick reference for your damage tokens. Basically, the whole back of the book acts as a nice quick reference as to how to clean everything up. So one thing that I will give is there are a lot of games, the first time I'm playing them, I find myself paging through the book very frequently. Like, for instance, Hero Quest is one that you'll find yourself when you're first setting up the game going, oh yeah, okay, now how does that play out again? This, I really admired that Restoration Games made the back of the book a quick reference. So very well put together, saddle stitched, full color print, glossy paper rule book on the 2023 Restoration Games Thunder Road Vendetta. So they're Restoration Games, I gotta say, they're knocking it out of the park. Great box art, great design on the box. The fit and finish to all the game parts has been great, and now a wonderful looking rule book. So let's get to the actual comparison. This is the fun part. To be honest, it's almost like two different games that share the same ancestry. Thunder Road, in its simplicity, is something that I really like. That's one thing that I admire is it only has the amount of parts that are absolutely necessary to play the game, which is something, I mean, I can't say that there's anything wasted here, but there are like extra tokens and stuff like that. But I mean, you've really inflated the function of the game when you get into the Restoration Games, and that's not a bad thing. You've added a lot. But with that come all the trappings of adding a lot. And there is something that I like about simplicity when it comes to game design. I actually think that playing the original Thunder Road is an excellent primer for getting somebody into Thunder Road Vendetta. This is definitely something that would be easier to play with a younger audience. As far as if I would go to the trouble to track down and fix up a copy of Thunder Road, the original, versus playing Vendetta based on the gameplay experience as a whole, I would say I'd only do it if I thought the original Thunder Road was enough of a nostalgia trip for me. I don't see how this is a detractor in any way. I actually think so. For instance, there are some games that don't always capture the spirit of the original. I'll give you a good example is Fireball Island is one that a lot of people talk about that restoration games did that felt significantly different from the original, and some people really liked it and some people didn't. And sometimes that departure can be so great, and in the instance of that game, where it's a bit more of a contentious subject with fans of the game. In this instance, I actually think that the departure in style is actually a boon. I don't look at this as something that I would consider fans of either one of the games to really be concerned about. I mean, the original 1986 game feels very much alive in Thunder Road Vendetta. If I wanted to recapture how this felt, if I had this game as a child and I somehow lost it over the years and I wanted to feel that again, I would highly recommend get Thunder Road Vendetta. Just the price-wise, the quality of the parts, and the gameplay in and of itself is so satisfying that I won't say that either one of them is bad. I don't think either one of them is bad. In fact, I think that Thunder Road has a lot of selling points in its simplicity. Like I said, this is great for a primer getting somebody into playing Thunder Road Vendetta, or teaching a younger player, or if you just have some people that aren't really oriented towards complex board games. Sometimes you're having game night with your friends, it's a social endeavor, and some people are very standoffish of complex games. This one is pretty easy for people to have a few cocktails and play through without getting too stressed. If you have a group of friends that are much more comfortable with more complicated games, and I really don't rate this as being too much more complicated than the original, but arguably there are more components, and that obviously adds to the complexity. That being said, this isn't a difficult game for somebody who's familiar with the first one to pick up and play, and for somebody who's familiar with board games that are a little bit more on the complex side to pick up and play. So I actually think this is quite a bit more approachable than it initially looks. When I first unpacked it, I gotta say, when I saw all the components, I went, wow, they kind of overcomplicated this game. I wonder what they added that needed to be so complicated. And in reality, it was just more that I saw all the components and took it for being more complicated. In reality, most of the components are there to make the game easier. Your dashboard tracker makes it easier to keep track of everybody's turn so that you can react accordingly. The additional hazards are so that you have variety and you can shuffle it. Same with the damage tokens. But otherwise, there are no superfluous pieces. There's nothing that's there that doesn't feel like it has a purpose or it's just there to exist. Everything actually works very nicely. I will give that this edition that I had, and you'll see some editions floating around that have this detail wash, also came with some additional what they called ammo cards. They appear to be rule modifiers. For the sake of this review, I really stuck to the core game rules of the base game so that I could give a fair comparison. But there are some additional editions of this, such as I think there's one called Maximum Chrome as well. That's like a collector's edition that will come with some additional features. So given that there are variations to the game, keep in mind that you might run into that. But this is really, I'm trying to reflect on the base game such as you're going to find retail. But another interesting thing to point out is this game was successful enough that Restoration has released some expansion packs for it, so you can expand your gameplay experience, which I also think is great. And this does strike me as a game that's rife for expansion. So, and I definitely would love to check those out in the future. But I think both are fantastic. Both stand on their own merits. Both come with excellent rule books, boxes, excellent game boards. I will say that the difference in the figurines was huge, and I don't know if it was the edition that I got, but I have the sneaking suspicion it was not. Just examining these pieces from the Restoration Games Thunder Road Vendetta, these do not appear to have been clipped off a sprue or anything ahead of time. These look like they were pretty well molded at the factory before I got them assembled, I should say, at the factory. I did notice there were instructions in the manual for putting the blades on the Thunder Chopper, which I did not have to do. Mine came assembled, which is why I was suspicious that having the detail washed version, I may have missed out on getting my pieces on sprues. But I see nothing here that indicates that these pieces were ever on sprues. So given that you don't have to cut the pieces off of sprues and assemble it, that is a fit and finish bonus to Thunder Road Vendetta, as boy, the assembly on these was kind of touchy. Not all of these hold together particularly well. They are snapped together, and I do intend on gluing. I've actually seen some very lovely sets that have been painted and detail washed to the original, and I'm kind of inclined to do that. So I haven't glued these together yet, but I am considering gluing them together. But finding complete sets that have the Doom buggy engines on them with the American version has already taught me that, yes, there was something to be desired with the fit and finish of putting the figurines together. However, that being said, for the time and for the cost of the game at the time, these little cars that came with the 1986 Thunder Road are just neat. These are just fantastic. I love they're lacking some detail because some of these little characters are supposed to be, some of these little bumps with a little kind of stick poking out of them are supposed to be a character with a gun or a gunner's seat, which look a little silly, but I mean, it doesn't need to be any more than that. It doesn't, like, you get the idea looking at it. So I think the detail is plenty on these. And again, it just tickles me. This looks so Mad Maxy. I loved the Mad Max movies, and this is just very exciting to play. It's actually, I'm not gonna lie, when I first got this together to play test it, I did put the Road Warrior up on my TV while I was playing it. It just sold me on it. I was so immersed. Loved it. Same thing, Thunder Road Vendetta, very immersive, but the fit and finish, I'm gonna say, I love the detail, even without the wash on there to make the details stand out on the vehicles. If you just examine these, the modeling is fantastic. A lot of love went into Thunder Road Vendetta, and it shows. Both wonderful games. I would say fit and finish wise, Thunder Road Vendetta wins out just a little bit more. I do enjoy the complexity that they added without going overboard, so it's a nice new flavor for an older Thunder Road player or more experienced Thunder Road player. This would be more primed for, especially if I was teaching a younger audience or a more casual audience, this would be the way I'd go. So I guess you tell me, have you played the 86 Thunder Road, the 2023 Thunder Road Vendetta? What did you think of the games? Comment below, let me know. Thanks for joining me, and I'll see you next time.